Hello, I'm Gary Stearman. You know, we've read about the giants in the Old Testament. Were there giants in the Western world, in the land that later became America? L.A. Marzulli is here to talk about that today. Fascinating subject. L.A., thanks for coming by.
Pleasure to be here, Gary.
We always appreciate your presence, and we've got an interesting subject to talk about today, and it has to do with the Nephilim. I think by now everybody's heard about the Nephilim, and they've got their opinions, their ideas. There's a lot of discussion about Nephilim, translated in the King James Bible as giants. But you've been on the trail of the Nephilim for quite a while now, and you have tracked them into places that people didn't think they were. But you're making the case that there was kind of an exodus of the Nephilim from the Middle East, and where did they go?
Well, it's a great question, and thanks for throwing that to me. But the bottom line is this: that we know when Joshua and Caleb go into the Promised Land, there's a mandate by the Holy God, the God of the Bible, the Most High God, and He states, "Wipe them all out: men, women, children, animals, burn everything." And that's genocide, and there's no way around it. That is genocide, unless there's something else. There's another dynamic that's happening in the Promised Land, in the Levant, that everyone in those times knew exactly what they were dealing with. And of course, when we actually look at who is inhabiting the Levant or the Promised Land, the Rephaim, the Nephilim, the Zamzummim, the Emams, the Amalekites, all Nephilim tribes in my opinion. And so as Joshua and Caleb begin to go in and annihilate these hybrid beings, remember the Nephilim are the progeny of the fallen angelic host of heaven and the women of earth, coming together in a sexual union. That stumbles a lot of people, but coming together in a sexual union, and the progeny of that becomes this hybrid being known as the Nephilim. And so our theory is that as Joshua and Caleb began to push in, the Nephilim tribes saw what was going on, saw that they were being literally decimated and wiped out and completely destroyed, and there was a diaspora. Some fled northward through Europe and literally, in my opinion, came over into the Americas. Others perhaps sailed on papyrus boats, and Thor Heyerdahl proved that in Kon-Tiki and Ra. That you can just leave the Mediterranean and wind up in the Gulf of Mexico. Others perhaps came down the Red Sea and out that way. The bottom line is, if our hypothesis is true, we should find evidence of that. And what's interesting, Gary, is we have found evidence in the Americas, both north, central, and south.
Now, before we talk to L.A. about the Americas and the Nephilim, I want to go back and firm up one point.
Sure.
Because there are a lot of people who literally will say something like, well, you can't find the word Nephilim in the Bible, and you use it all the time. And I just want to go back to Joshua and Caleb and read a verse. This is Numbers 13:33. And this is the report of the spies who went into Israel, came back, and they say, "And there we saw the giants, the sons of Enoch, which come of the giants. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight." Now, twice in that sentence, the word giants is used in English, and it's a direct translation of the word Nephilim. So lest there be any confusion, the Bible does talk about Nephilim. It talks about God's command to rid the land of the giants, and it makes sense that they would be on the run, because essentially through the power and the leading of the Lord, they were able to overcome the giants. Yes. And probably for the first time in their lives, the giants were afraid of human beings.
Well, that's exactly right. And as they're going into the land, I mean, we get, and this is what's amazing. I mean, when you just take the Bible at face value, who the heck was Og, king of Bashan?
Yeah.
And, it talks about the 18 cubits. We're looking at a being 13 to 14 feet. I mean, if we're going to take the Bible literally, we can't pick and choose, which scriptures we're going, well, that's okay, but this one I don't like. Either we embrace, the whole of it, or we lose really the meaning of what we're reading. And this character, Og, at 13 or 14 feet, is an awfully big guy. And of course, he is a Nephilim. That's the whole point.
Right.
He is a Nephilim. He is a hybrid being. This is why the destruction, this is why the mandate comes down from God to wipe them all out. And of course, again, we believe it was a diaspora, they fled, and they inhabited other places.
You know, I didn't plan on going here, but it occurs to me as you're talking that our conception of the ancient giants is that they're kind of big, clumsy oafs, lumbering dummies, you know, and I think we get that from David and Goliath. You know, David fought Goliath and won the fight with his slingshot, a well-placed stone, and it sort of makes Goliath look like a lumbering dummy. So there's this idea, well, if giants did exist, they couldn't have been much of a threat, and they probably weren't very bright. But as you look at the ancient traces, archaeological tracks that they left, they seem to be very, very bright indeed. They seem to have had abilities and skills that we no longer have.
Well, a couple of things. Let me address that point. In North America, you've got America's Stonehenge, which is a henge is a circle. And what we see as astronomical alignments of the summer, winter solstices, the equinoxes, standing stones that are placed up. That knowledge comes from somewhere. Where does that knowledge come from? You go to Sacsayhuaman in Peru and you see these huge megalithic structures, 120-ton stones from a quarry 40 to 50 miles away. The stones are andesite, extremely hard, 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, diamond being number 10. It begs the question, where does the technology come from to construct these huge walls that we see in Sacsayhuaman? How did they move 120-ton stones? We can laugh at that, and the skeptics always do, but they offer no solution other than log rollers. It's not going to work. And then how were they going to cut the andesite stone in the Neolithic when all they've got is copper chisels? Copper chisels will not cut andesite. Go to a site, let's say like Teotihuacan in Mexico City. I've been to all these places. And in Teotihuacan, you look at this unbelievable architecture and mathematics and building techniques. I mean, where does the knowledge come from? And it just springs up. There's no pre-existing culture. All this information just arrives intact, you know, in toto, right there, right now. And these sites have been abandoned. No one really knows who built them or why. There's a lot of mythos. Well, maybe it was this, maybe it was that, but we really don't know. For instance, America's Stonehenge, getting back to the first one. That site is probably 4,000 years old. And when you take, and we've talked about this before on your show, but I know there's a lot of new listeners. When you go from the center of that henge out to the summer solstice standing stone, longest day of the year, we just had it a short while ago. Summer solstice standing stone, you draw a line. This is the work of Kelsey Stone. You extend the line, you wind up splitting the central trilithon in Stonehenge, England, and that's not a coincidence. In other words, the alignment between the sites is absolutely precise, down to the inch. And you can't do that in antiquity. You'd be hard-pressed to do it in modernity. You can do it today because of the satellites positioned all over the globe. Yeah, you can do that. You can triangulate and make that happen. But go back 4,000 years. You know, they're not going to draw a string from Stonehenge, England, and you got the curvature of the earth to consider, and all these, it's extremely complex. And yet, it's there. It's just staring at us. And I find this absolutely phenomenal because the evidence of this, look, the Nephilim Mounds Conference is going to be September 12th, September 13th. You're going to be there. Russ Dizdar will be there. Chief Joseph Riverwind, Fritz Zimmerman's going to give us a tour of the Great Circle Mound, 10 hours. It's going to be absolutely packed. September 12th, September 13th, Nephilim Mounds, the number 3.com, NephilimMounds3.com, and you can check it out. But when we go, and we will go, where even if it's raining, bring your rain gear, folks, we'll go to the Great Circle Mound, because when you're there and you're standing in the Circle Mound, and you're looking at the enormity of it, just how huge this thing is. And the archaeologists tell you that, well, Native Americans took birch bark baskets and little clam shells, and one basket at a time, and it took 100 years. If you want to believe that, that's fine. I don't believe that. And the Native Americans I've talked to, that's why we're having Chief Joseph there, because you know he's traveled in all this, and it's just a bunch of nonsense. Native Americans, First Nation people, did not do these type of building structures. They didn't do it. And again, all these sites, like the Great Circle Mound in Ohio, it's in just a short distance away, the Octagon Mound is there, are all aligned to the planets, to the stars, to the Pleiades. Yes. It's extremely deliberate. extremely deliberate, and I find that absolutely fascinating.
They were following a pattern of some kind.
Sure.
And a pattern and a plan. Probably they were trying to enact some control system whereby they could control the whole world. I mean, if they're doing things on that scale, they've got the world in mind. And it seems to me that they were not godly people. They were following Satan. Just by sheer logic, you have to come up with that idea.
In all these sites, Gary, in every site I just mentioned, the America Stonehenge, Teotihuacan, Sacsayhuaman, and other sites, Chichen Itza, and other sites, there is always evidence, even the Circle Mound in Ohio, there is always evidence of human sacrifice. In fact, America Stonehenge is chilling because in the middle and the center of that henge, there's a chamber. And that chamber, by the way, is covered with a clay, it's turned like to concrete, which is completely waterproof, the interior of the chamber. The interior of the chamber is dry. And you're surrounded by megalithic stones, and there's like sort of like a causeway that goes underneath the altar. So someone would be in there, and you would hear their voice sounding like it was coming out of the ground. Well, where the altar is, and it is an altar, by the way, there's this 10-foot by 6-foot slab of granite. I believe it's granite. And in that granite, and here's the other thing, once again, we see a channel that's cut all the way around that granite. And the granite is tilted this way. And it's a sacrificial table. And at the end of the granite, there's another little channel to allow the blood to go out. Why are they doing this? Why the blood sacrifice? And this disturbs archaeologists because, well, they sort of tap dance around. They don't want to get into the whole idea of human sacrifice or cannibalism, but that's what it is. And isn't it interesting how it ties back to the Book of Enoch, which describes exactly what we see, the idea of human sacrifice, the idea of cannibalism. We see it in America Stonehenge. We read about it in the Book of Enoch. Fascinating.
And by the way, we find that copied by the natives, the native peoples of South America, what's today called South America. You have the Incas and the Aztecs, and they were very, very heavily into blood sacrifice,
Very much so.
Human sacrifice. And where did they get that idea? Which gods were they sacrificing to? And so there's a connection there too.
Yeah, I've never been to Chichen Itza, but I certainly have studied it. And I know that 50,000, upwards of 50,000, perhaps even more, people were ritualistically sacrificed. If you ever go to that site, folks, you really need to be prayed up, really prayed up, because you are entering a charged site which is holy to them. I mean, it's a demonically charged site where 50,000 people were literally sacrificed to open up the gateway to the gods with a little g. And of course, the gods that they're worshiping, in my opinion, and I know you embrace this too,
Sure.
are the fallen host of heaven, the fallen angelic host of heaven that serve Hasatan, Satan,
Now,
the dragon.
this message that you're coming up with, and you're developing it as time goes by, and we've sort of followed your lead on this, this message seems timed for today. In other words, a century ago, century and a half ago, this message was still dormant. It was buried. Nobody
much
was
so.
talking about any
Very
of it.
much so.
But it has become a threat right now. Exposing all this, it has been difficult for you because you find cover-ups everywhere you go. There are people who don't want this information out. Tell us a little about that.
Well, it's absolutely true. For instance, and I'll sort of spill the beans a little bit on this, but we were in Catalina, and this is all on the Trail of the Nephilim, Volume 2. But in Catalina, I was able to go into a cache of records that had been missing for 50 or 60 years. Ralph Glidden, it was all of the cache of records reflected Ralph Glidden's work. They were his personal notes, his journals, his letters, his photographs, all had gone missing. Ralph Glidden was an archaeologist, quote, sort of an archaeologist, a primitive archaeologist, employed by the High Museum. The High was later gobbled up by the Smithsonian. So Glidden is doing all this work, 1919 and 1921. He's digging up lots of Native American remains all over the Channel Islands, which are from Santa Barbara on the west coast of the United States down to San Diego, the Channel Islands. Well, I contributed $1,000 to the museum, and I was able to go and look at these records, which had been lost basically for decades. And it was a sanitized collection. In other words, everything had already been poured over, cataloged, put in manila folders and museum boxes and stowed away. So I'm not looking at what's this, as if pulling it out of a trunk. It's not that way at all.
Yeah.
And so the museum boxes came out. The first thing I wanted to look at were the photographs. And remember, I'm going in there with a biblical filter. I'm looking for giants. I'm looking for elongated skulls. I'm looking for 6 fingers. That's what I'm looking for. I found all 3 in the pictures, and all those pictures are on the Trail of the Nephilim too. What's incredible is one picture which was actually picked up by the History Channel, and I was on that last season in Search of the Lost Giants. They used that picture. It shows Ralph Glidden standing in a recently excavated grave, and in front of him is a large giant. You told me, you gave me the lead on this, that there are people who can take that photograph and digitize it and determine the height, if you know the height of just some known objects. And we had Shovels and Ralph Glidden, who was 5'8". That was, many people came on the record and said he was 5'8". And we were able to ascertain through 3 different researchers working independently of each other that giant in front, that skeleton in front of Glidden was just shy of 9 feet. And that's unprecedented. Here's the kicker. This is a first, and I'm happy to do it on Prophecy Watchers. When we went back to the museum just a short while ago, and we walked in the museum, that picture that I discovered and the History Channel used is now blown up, and it's on the wall, except, and I'll give you the JPEG of this, except they have cropped the picture. So the giant is no longer in that shot. All you see is Ralph Glidden holding a shovel like this and sort of leaning to one side. The giant has been cropped. That is a deliberate obfuscation. When I went to the curator and asked, why did you guys do this? The curator said, well, we didn't want to offend NAGPRA, too many Native American skeletons being shown. And I said, look at all the rest of the pictures in this museum. All they are is Native American bones. And this is the one picture that might not be Native American. And that's the one you don't show the people, which would alter the Darwinian paradigm, and that's why they don't do it.
Just happened to be the picture that ascertained the size or the height of a particular giant. Therefore, it's no good. It has to go.
Absolutely. Hidden.
I need to catch my breath, and I'm going to do it by making an announcement here. Many of you may already have heard of this, but Prophecy Watchers, prophecywatchers.com, is launching a new magazine. It's called The Prophecy Watcher. Here is a facsimile of our first cover. And by the way, L.A. Marzulli is going to be one of the contributing writers to this new magazine. Of course, we have lots of people who will be writing. I, of course, will write articles on a monthly basis. Bob Ulrich is going to have an occasional article. He does book reviews very, very well, I might add. L.A., Tom Horn, Bill Koenig, Bill Salas, Ken Johnson, Avi Lipkin, many, many others going to be contributing timely, up to the moment, I should say, articles for The Prophecy Watcher. Here's the facsimile first cover. You can help us launch this magazine because for a limited time, we're offering a lifetime subscription to The Prophecy Watcher for your donation of $100 to prophecywatchers.com. And you can check the website and just go right to the online bookstore and you'll find out how you can become a part of the launching of The Prophecy Watcher. I'm really excited about this, L.A., because people like you are going to have an outlet, a venue, if you will.
It's quite an honor. Thank you.
And we will love to add your contributing articles from time to time because I know you're going to be discovering some amazing things. Mm-hmm. Now, where should we go from here in the study of the giants? The giants, as such, quote unquote, are a very, very timely subject for the simple reason that I believe we're coming back around to a period when evil is going to explode on planet Earth. We're going to go back to a world of darkness. It's prophesied throughout the Bible. An era leading up to the Antichrist, all kinds of occultism, an explosion of occultism, an explosion of dark demonic forces. And of course, you've tracked many of these things. What does the whole giants phenomena or phenomenon have to do with this period that we're living in right now?
Well, Yeshua, Jesus warns us. He said it'll be like the days of Noah when the Son of Man returns. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the gist of it. And that immediately calls the the Bible student to go back and, well, what the heck differentiates the days of Noah? We've talked about this before. And in my opinion, there's one glaring, there's several details which really stand out. But of course, the number one detail is the idea that the fallen angels are having sex with the women and creating a hybrid being known as the Nephilim. And you say, well, that's preposterous, L.A. Where is that happening today? Well, it is. And that's what our Watchers series, Watchers 7, Watchers 8, specifically get into. And the New Agers on the other side of the aisle they're waiting for the disclosure of E.T., the extraterrestrial. The Vatican, the work of Chris Putman, Tom Horn, talks about the Vatican, we want to baptize E.T. and they're ready to embrace an alien savior. Chris Putman came on camera and said more people in the UK, but data shows, quote, the data shows that there's more people in the UK that believe in E.T. than they do the God of the Bible. So we've had a paradigm shift here in people's worldview. And that basically they're looking out there for some sort of an alien savior to come. And when they show up, and I call this the coming great deception and the Luciferian endgame, this coming great deception will be this. E.T. will say that we created all life on this planet. We genetically manipulated early man to what he is today. That provides the missing link that the Darwinists are always after. We started the world's civilizations and religions, and now at this critical juncture in human history, we, E.T., are back, and we're going to usher mankind into a golden age of peace and prosperity. This is the coming great deception. What people don't understand, look, even today, there was another sighting of another UFO, one over the English, by Liverpool, and it's a very, clear shot. I mean, I looked at the thing, and it seems like the real deal. The bottom line is UFOs are real burgeoning and not going away. Paul Hellyer, the former defense secretary of the Canadian government, stated, and I quote, UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead. Now, that sounds absurd to some of your listeners out there. This is Paul Hellyer who's stating this. And when we realize that different countries all around the globe, Mexico, Japan, Brazil, Germany, the UK, France, all have come forward stating that the UFO phenomenon is real.
And so the UFOs are this generation's intrusion of angels from on high.
That's what we believe. That these are not ET, these are not friendly aliens from Zeta Reticuli. These are, in fact, demonic entities posing as extraterrestrials.
Well, Paul mentioned the prince of the power of the air.
There you go.
That would be Satan.
Yes.
And his minions who fly through the air and do all kinds of evil deeds. The UFOs, what else? And of course, Paul mentioned principalities and powers and rulers of darkness being present all over the earth. They've been suppressed for a while, but they seem to be becoming much more active in the last 50, 60 years. So we're in that era now.
We have gone from, and I say this at conferences, well, the year I was born, 1950, in the month of December, the month I was born, one UFO sighting. Fast forward to 2014, there are at least 1,000 sightings worldwide, the ones that are reported. Who knows how many are not reported because people don't want to get ridiculed. The phenomenon is real. It is burgeoning. It is not going away. People need to understand that if a mile-wide craft shows up, everything changes. It's a paradigm shift. Everything changes.
Now, I'm going to offer our viewers a chance to learn more about this subject. And in fact, I'm holding a couple of DVD sets here, the Nephilim Mounds Conference and the second annual Nephilim Mounds Conference. There's going to be a third Nephilim Mounds Conference.
That's right, September 12th.
And
you'll be speaking there.
I'll be speaking there. L.A. Marzulli. Tell us a little bit about it.
September 12th, September 13th, Russ Dizdar, Gary Stearman, Chief Joseph Riverwind, which will bring the whole Native American perspective to the conference. Fritz Zimmerman, incredible research, will be speaking, and also on the 13th, taking us out to the mounds for a lecture and a tour there. That's going to be incredible. You won't want to miss that.
And I've seen those mounds, and they are
incredible,
indescribable.
You've got a special message about the Nephilim, which you're bringing. I can't wait for that.
And it's top secret right now. Anyway, if you'd like the Nephilim Mounds package, $99.95 for both conference DVD sets, Nephilim Mounds 1 and 2, And if you order both of these for $99.95, we're going to add the Chicago Summit 2013. L.A. spoke there along with Russ Dizdar, along with Doug Woodward, Tom Dunn, Derek and Sharon Gilbert spoke there. A lot of information. And so if you order the Nephilim Mounds 1 and 2 package, we're going to add absolutely free to that the Chicago Summit 2013 DVD package. There's so much information in these DVDs that will bring you up to speed on what LA's been talking about for the last few minutes. And I think it's high time that we threw away the old paradigm and moved into the new one, because there are a lot of people out there dragging their feet and saying this is nothing that Christians should be talking about, right?
It's everything Christians should be talking about. Jesus warns us specifically, men faint from fear for what is coming upon the earth. Unless those days were shortened, no flesh would survive. Paul writes and tells us, warns us, admonishes us, Satan, the fallen cherub, comes with all signs and lying wonders. I mean, those are dire warnings, and yet the church is asleep, and, it's this touchy, feel-good Jesus thing. We are in a battle, and it's ramping up to the time of the Antichrist. Of course, you and I both believe that the only solution, the only way out, literally is up. And that's what you and I hold to tenaciously. What a promise. I can't wait for that. But the bottom line is this. We serve a supernatural God. And when we take the supernatural out of the Bible, which most churches do, there's hardly anything left. And what we're talking about here is the supernatural interfacing with the natural, with the whole UFO phenomenon that's happening in modernity, and of course what we talked about in antiquity with the Nephilim architecture that we see, fallen angel architecture. This is the technology of the fallen ones. Nephilim architecture, technology of the fallen ones, fallen angel technology.
It occurs to me, we need to put the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ in the forefront. We need to bring as many people to Christ as possible, but the Bible also says, be ye wise as serpents and harmless as doves. We've got to know about the dark side, so we'll know enough not to be deceived. And the church needs to know enough not to be deceived. And I think that's your message, your driving message.
That's the heart of the message. Absolutely. That's why I do what I do.
It is so amazing, the era in which we live. We know that the Antichrist, and I think he's probably alive today. He's waiting to make his entrance. Mm-hmm. Perhaps he doesn't even know who he is. One of these days, some human being is going to be filled with a very dark spirit. He's going to emerge as the global leader. There's so much prophecy about this. And his minions, the people who give him all his power, will be the princes of the power of the air. They will be the rulers of darkness, the ones who first came down as described in the book of Enoch. So we're coming full circle.
It's full circle.
We're coming back to the
beginning.
I concur. Exciting times to be alive. LA, it's just always so stimulating to talk with you. Thanks so much for being with us.
I appreciate it, Gary. God bless you.
Love you, brother.
Love you too. Thank you.
All right. And I'm glad that you got a chance to listen to LA today. And I hope that you'll take advantage of the Nephilim Mounds package that we talked about, because there's so much information in there you need to have. Gary Stearman for Prophecy Watchers. We're watching, so you be watching too. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com or follow us at facebook.com/prophecywatchers. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.